Most werewolf stories begin with power and dominance, but Xiomara's story began with iron. Not metaphorical chains of duty or tradition, but actual iron shackles that had worn grooves into her wrists for 3 torturous years. Iron that burned against Omega skin, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Iron that kept her wolf trapped so deep inside that sometimes Xiomara forgot she had one at all. The mountain fortress of Windfallow had been her prison since that terrible night 2 years after her village burned. The night her own pack had discovered what she could do. They dragged her here in terror, calling her an abomination before the iron doors slammed shut. Tonight, like every night, Xiomara sat in the tower's highest cell, watching the moon rise through barred windows. The shackles connected to chains embedded in the stone floor, giving her just enough length to reach the water bucket and the daily bread they shoved through the slot. Just enough to survive, never enough to live. But tonight was different. Tonight, voices echoed up the stone stairs. Many voices. "The binding ceremony requires an omega," someone said, their words carrying clearly in the mountain air. "Any omega will suffice for the ritual." "We have one," replied the fortress keeper, his keys jangling. "Though, I warn you, she's unusual. We keep her separated from the others for a reason." Footsteps climbed closer. Xiomara pressed herself against the far wall, a response trained by years of guards who enjoyed tormenting the mysterious prisoner. The door's heavy locks turned one by one, 7 locks for 1 omega. Even the guards thought it excessive, though none questioned why. The door opened, revealing not the usual guards but strangers in royal blue cloaks. Behind them stood a man whose presence seemed to fill the narrow doorway. Dark hair fell across sharp cheekbones, and storm-gray eyes surveyed the cell with barely concealed disgust. "This is how you keep your omegas?" His voice carried the kind of authority that didn't need volume to command attention. The fortress keeper stammered. "She's dangerous, Lord Rasmus." Her previous pack insisted. "I didn't ask for excuses." Lord Rasmus stepped into the cell. His nostrils flared slightly, and something flickered across his features. Confusion? Recognition? It passed too quickly to tell. "Release her." But the ceremony only requires her presence, not her freedom. Did I stutter? The keeper fumbled for the iron keys with shaking hands. As he approached, Xiomara noticed Lord Rasmus watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She hadn't been truly looked at in years. Guards averted their eyes. Other prisoners were kept away. Even the fortress keeper rarely entered her cell. The shackles fell away with a clatter that echoed like thunder. Xiomara's wrists screamed as blood rushed back to areas long restricted. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, tasting copper as her fangs, longer than a typical omega's, pierced the tender flesh. "Can you walk?" Lord Rasmus asked, his tone softer now. Xiomara nodded, though her legs trembled as she stood. The limited movement had left her muscles weak, her body thin. But she would walk out of this cell even if she had to crawl. "What's your name?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. When had she last spoken? The words felt foreign on her tongue. "Xiomara," she managed, her voice rough as sandpaper. "Xiomara." He tested the name, and something in his expression shifted. "You're coming with us. King Zephyrian requires an omega for the lunar ceremony 3 days hence." The king. Xiomara's mind reeled. King Zephyrian Valdris was legendary even in the mountain fortress, the alpha who had united the fractured kingdoms, the wolf who could shift at will, even during the new moon when others were powerless. The mateless king who refused all arrangements, driving the council to desperate measures. They wrapped her in a cloak that smelled of pine and winter wind. Every step down the tower stairs was agony, but Xiomara forced herself forward. She had dreamed of leaving this place. She wouldn't falter now. The courtyard held more surprises. A royal caravan waited, banners bearing the Valdris coat of arms, a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon. But it was the woman standing beside the largest carriage that made Xiomara's blood freeze. Tall and elegant, with white blonde hair twisted into an elaborate crown braid, the woman wore the deep purple robes of a high priestess. Even from a distance, something about her presence felt wrong, like looking at a beautiful painting and slowly realizing the paint was mixed with blood. High Priestess Lysandra. Though they'd never met directly, Xiomara knew that face from the worst night of her life. The woman who had orchestrated the attack on her village. The woman who had killed her mother. Lysandra's pale blue eyes found Xiomara's, and the smallest smile curved her lips. A predator recognizing prey it had been tracking for years. "The Omega appears adequate," Lysandra said smoothly, though her gaze lingered on Xiomara's scarred wrists. "Though I question bringing damaged goods before His Majesty." "The king's requirements were specific," Lord Rasmus replied, an edge to his voice. "An unmated Omega of birthing age. Nothing more." Still, Lysandra stepped closer, and Xiomara caught the scent of bitter herbs and something else. Something that made her dormant wolf suddenly stir. A wrongness, like flowers growing from a grave. Perhaps we should test her wolf. Ensure she can still shift. A wolfless Omega would be useless for the ceremony. Panic flared in Xiomara's chest. She hadn't shifted in 3 years. The iron had kept her wolf suppressed, buried so deep she wasn't sure she could find it again. And if they discovered what her wolf truly was... "That won't be necessary," Lord Rasmus said, moving subtly between them. The king's orders were to bring an Omega, not to test one. Lysandra's eyes narrowed to slits. "You forget yourself, Lord Rasmus. As High Priestess, the ceremony falls under my domain." A howl cut through the night, deep and commanding. Every wolf in the courtyard dropped to their knees instinctively. Every wolf except Xiomara, who stood frozen as a massive black wolf padded into the courtyard, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, with eyes that burned gold in the darkness. The wolf's gaze locked onto hers, and Xiomara felt something crack inside her chest. Something that had been frozen since the night her village burned. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, reaching toward this magnificent creature with desperate hunger. The black wolf shifted mid-stride, and suddenly King Zephyrian Valdris stood before her in human form, wearing nothing but moonlight and absolute authority. Someone quickly draped a robe around his shoulders, but his attention never left Xiomara's face. "You," he said, his voice carrying a rumble that was more wolf than man. "You're the one I've been searching for." Lysandra's perfect smile faltered for just a moment, a crack in her mask that only Xiomara caught. The game had begun, and the pieces were not moving as the priestess had planned. "You're the one I've been searching for." The king's words hung in the mountain air like a challenge to fate itself. Xiomara's knees trembled, but she forced herself to remain standing. Years of surviving iron chains had taught her that showing weakness invited predators. "Your Majesty," High Priestess Lysandra interjected smoothly, recovering her composure. "Perhaps we should discuss the ceremony preparations. The moon will be at its apex in 3 days." "Leave us," King Zephyrian commanded without taking his golden gaze off Xiomara. "But the ritual requires..." "I said leave." His voice carried an alpha command that made even Lysandra step back. "All of you, Lord Rasmus, ensure our guest has proper chambers, not the servant quarters, the sapphire wing." Gasps rippled through the assembled wolves. The sapphire wing was reserved for visiting royalty and the king's family, though he had none left. Lord Rasmus bowed. "The ceremonies, Your Majesty. The council expects. The council expects me to perform their binding ritual with whatever omega they've procured." "Fine, but I'll prepare her myself." Zephyrian's attention never wavered from Sayomara's face. "No one else touches her. No one else speaks to her without my permission. Is that understood?" The courtyard emptied with remarkable speed, though Sayomara caught Lysandra's lingering stare. Cold calculation mixed with something else. Hunger, perhaps, or recognition of prey that might become predator. When they were alone, Zephyrian stepped closer, and Sayomara's dormant wolf pressed against the barriers 3 years of iron had built. "Your wrists," he said quietly, his fingers hovering near but not touching the angry scars. "Iron shackles." "How long?" 3 years in chains," she whispered. 5 since my village burned." His jaw clenched. "Your pack did this?" She nodded, unable to explain that it hadn't been cruelty but terror that motivated them. They'd seen what she became that night 2 years after her mother's death, when grief and rage finally exploded outward, what she was capable of when pushed too far. "Follow me," he said, turning toward the castle. Then, softer, "Please." The please undid something in her chest. Alphas didn't say please to Omegas. Kings certainly didn't say please to prisoners. The sapphire wing was a dream of luxury that made Sayomara dizzy. Soft carpets beneath her bare feet, warm air that didn't smell of mold and desperation, windows without bars. The bathing chamber alone was larger than her cell had been. "Bathe. Eat. Rest," Zephyrian instructed, gesturing to the spread of food already waiting. "The ceremony is in 3 days. You'll need your strength." He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "That priestess, you recognized her." It wasn't a question. Sayomara's silence was answer enough. "She won't harm you here," he said. "You have my word." After he left, Sayomara stood frozen for long minutes, overwhelmed by space and freedom. The bath called to her. Hot water was a luxury she'd dreamed of, but first, she needed to understand why she was here. Moving to the window, she studied the castle grounds below. Guards patrolled in precise patterns. Servants scurried between buildings. And there, in the eastern tower, lights blazed from what could only be the temple where the ceremony would occur in 3 days' time. The binding ceremony. She'd heard fragments about it from gossiping guards. An ancient ritual that would force a mate bond between the king and a chosen Omega, ensuring an heir for the kingdom. The council had grown desperate after Zephyrian refused every political match for 7 years. But why her? Why pull a damaged, imprisoned Omega from a mountain fortress when there were hundreds of willing candidates? A knock interrupted her thoughts. A servant girl entered, eyes downcast, carrying fresh clothing. "From His Majesty," she whispered, setting down garments of deep blue silk. "He says to tell you these will help." She gestured to items Sayomara hadn't noticed. Silver bands designed to cover her wrist scars, a decorative collar that would hide her neck, gloves of the finest leather. But there was something else, barely visible. Faint markings on the inside of each piece. Runes of protection, she realized. Old magic, the kind her mother had once whispered about. "Help with what?" Sayomara asked. The servant girl glanced nervously at the door. "With staying hidden from those who would use your past against you. His Majesty, he knows things, sees things others miss. The ceremony isn't what the council thinks." After the girl left, Sayomara finally surrendered to the bath. The hot water was paradise and torture combined, awakening nerve endings long dormant. As she soaked, memories surfaced unbidden. The night her village burned 5 years ago, Sayomara had been barely 16 when masked wolves attacked without warning. Her mother, Serafina, had pushed her into the root cellar, whispering ancient words Sayomara didn't understand, words she now recognized as nightbloom blessings, meant to hide and protect. But the attackers found them anyway. Lysandra herself had entered the cellar, her beautiful face twisted with triumph. "The Nightbloom line," she'd said, examining Sayomara's mother. "I thought we'd eliminated you all." "You'll never have her gift," Serafina had spat, blood running from her mouth. "It dies with me." "We'll see about that," Lysandra had replied, then ordered her wolves to drag them both out. What happened next was crystal clear in Sayomara's memory, burned there by trauma and rage. Her mother's death. Not quick, but slow, deliberate. Lysandra draining something from her with each touch, growing younger and more vibrant as Serafina aged decades in minutes. Sayomara's wolf had exploded outward in grief and fury, not the small omega wolf everyone expected, but something massive, touched by ancient power. Her fur had been deep silver, holding starlight in every strand. Her eyes had blazed violet, the mark of the true Nightbloom line. The attackers had fled, but not before the surviving villagers saw her transform. They'd called her cursed, abomination, monster. 2 years later, when she'd shifted again during a territorial dispute, the village elders had finally acted. They'd dragged her to Windfallow Fortress, paid the keepers to lock her away where she could never hurt anyone, or reveal what she truly was. The water had gone cold when another memory surfaced. Lysandra standing over her mother's body, collecting vials of blood. "The essence is in the bloodline," she'd murmured. "If I can't have it naturally, I'll take it by force." Sayomara jerked from the bath, water sloshing onto pristine floors. She dressed quickly in the silk garments, noting how they covered every scar, every mark that might reveal her past. The hidden runes hummed faintly against her skin. Protection, yes, but also enhancement. They were designed to help her wolf emerge when the time came. The king knew. Somehow he knew exactly what she was. As midnight approached, she stood at the window again, watching clouds race across the moon. In 3 days, they would try to force a mate bond, but now she understood. This wasn't about giving the king an heir. This was about something else entirely. Another knock came, but this time, no servant entered. Instead, Zephyrian's voice carried through the wood. "May I enter?" She opened the door to find the king looking oddly uncertain, an expression that seemed foreign on his commanding features. "You're not sleeping," he observed. "Neither are you." A slight smile tugged at his lips. "No. The ceremony, it's not what you think." "What is it then?" He entered the room, moving to the window she'd been haunting. "Your mother was Serafina Nightbloom, wasn't she?" The name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in 5 years hit her like a physical blow. "How did you—" "Because my grandmother was Celestara Nightbloom, your mother's aunt. Because the blood that runs through your veins is the same that saved my family line generations ago." His storm-gray eyes shifted, gold bleeding through like sun through clouds. "You're not just any Omega, Sayomara. You're the last of the Nightbloom line, the Omega who carries the gift of lunar sight, the ability to see through deceptions, to unravel lies." He turned to face her fully. "And in 3 days, when Lysandra tries to bind us in her corrupted ceremony, she'll learn what happens when you cage a wolf who was born to break chains." The ceremony hall thrummed with anticipation as hundreds of wolves gathered beneath the vaulted ceiling. Ancient symbols carved into stone pillars glowed faintly in the candlelight. Runes that Xiomara recognized from fragmented memories of her mother's teachings. The Nightbloom gift, dormant for 3 years, stirred within her like a creature waking from hibernation. She stood at the altar's base, draped in ceremonial white that made her feel more like a sacrifice than a bride. The silver band Zephyrian had given her covered her wrist scars perfectly, and the decorative collar hid the burns around her throat. The protection runes hummed against her skin, ready. "Remember," Zephyrian had whispered before the ceremony, standing close enough that his warmth seeped into her bones. "When Lysandra speaks the binding words, don't resist. Let her believe her trap is working. The Nightbloom gift will show you the truth beneath her deceptions." The gift? He'd explained it more fully over the past 3 days. The ability to see through magical illusions, to unravel spells by understanding their true nature. Her mother had died protecting this secret. Now Xiomara would use it to expose Lysandra's corruption. Lysandra glided toward the altar in robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Power radiated from her in waves that made nearby wolves unconsciously step back. But through her awakening gift, Xiomara saw something else. Dark threads extending from the priestess like a spider's web, touching every wolf present. "Brothers and sisters," Lysandra's voice filled the hall without effort. "Tonight we witness the sacred binding, a tradition as old as our kind. Our king has walked alone too long. The kingdom requires an heir. The bloodline must continue." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lord Rasmus stood among the council members, his expression carefully neutral, though Xiomara caught him glancing at the exits. Beside him, Lord Aldrich watched with shrewd eyes, while Lord Fenwick stood rigid with traditional pride. "Come forward, Omega," Lysandra commanded. Xiomara climbed the altar steps. With each step, the runes on the pillars pulsed brighter, responding not to the ceremony she realized through her gift, but to her Nightbloom blood recognizing its own power. Zephyrian already waited at the altar's summit, magnificent in black ceremonial armor. When their eyes met, she saw past the king's mask to something else, fierce protectiveness mixed with an emotion that made her heart race. "Your hand," Lysandra instructed. The moment Xiomara extended her palm, Lysandra grabbed it with surprising strength. Pain shot through her arm as the priestess's nails drew blood. Several drops fell onto the altar stone, and the runes blazed to life. But through her gift, Xiomara saw the truth. The runes weren't part of the original ceremony. Lysandra had corrupted them, twisted them into conduits for stealing power. "Ancient blood recognizes ancient blood," Lysandra murmured, too low for the crowd to hear. Her eyes glittered with triumph. "The last Nightbloom in my grasp at last." "Proceed with the ceremony," Zephyrian said sharply. Lysandra's smile was poison-sweet. "Patience, Your Majesty. The ritual requires precision." She released Xiomara's hand and raised her arms. Behold, the lost bloodline returned. Through her gift, Xiomara suddenly saw the full scope of Lysandra's plan. Shadow threads weren't just touching the wolves, they were draining them, siphoning tiny amounts of power from each. The ceremony wasn't to bind her and Zephyrian. It was to bind the entire kingdom's power to Lysandra's will. "For 7 years, our king has refused all matches," Lysandra continued, "but blood calls to blood. This Omega carries the gift of sight. Their union will herald a new age. But first," Lysandra's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow everyone heard, "we must awaken the Omega's true nature." Before anyone could react, Lysandra pressed her palm against Xiomara's forehead. Power slammed into her consciousness, but instead of overwhelming her, the Nightbloom gift absorbed it, understood it, began to unravel it from within. Her wolf exploded to the surface, but controlled this time, purposeful. Sayomara's transformation was deliberate and magnificent. Her wolf form stood equal to Zephyrian's alpha height. Her fur wasn't common brown or gray, but deep silver that held constellations in every strand. Her eyes blazed violet, the mark of the night bloom line, the color that hadn't been seen in decades. The crowd recoiled. Several wolves shifted instinctively, pressing against walls. "Impossible," someone whispered. But Lysandra laughed, cold and triumphant. "Not impossible. Evolution." The Nightbloom Omegas were never weak. They were seers, truth-bringers, unravelers of lies. She pulled out a black crystal from her robes, its surface crawling with trapped shadows. "And now, with the last Nightbloom under my control, I can finally complete the grand binding. Not just one wolf to another, but an entire kingdom to my will." Through her gift, Sayomara saw the crystal's true nature, woven from the life force of dozens of murdered Nightblooms, including her own mother. But she also saw its fatal weakness. The crystal required willing submission to work, and Sayomara would never submit to her mother's killer. "No," she said, her human voice emerging from her wolf throat, a Nightbloom ability Lysandra hadn't expected. "I see you now, Lysandra. I see what you've stolen, what you've corrupted. The shadows you command are built on murdered dreams, and I reject it all." The crystal began to crack, hairline fractures spreading across its surface like breaking ice. "Impossible!" Lysandra snarled, pouring more power into it. But Sayomara's gift was already unraveling the ceremony from within, following the shadow threads back to their source, severing Lysandra's connections to the stolen power she'd accumulated over decades. Each thread snapped with a sound like breaking violin strings. Zephyrian shifted to his wolf form, moving to stand beside Sayomara. His black fur seemed to absorb light while hers reflected it, shadow and starlight united. "Did you really think," he rumbled, "that I would bring the last Nightbloom here without knowing exactly what you planned?" The altar stone split down the middle with a sound like thunder. The corrupted runes flickered and died. And Lysandra's black crystal shattered completely, releasing decades of stolen life force back into the world. The explosion of released power sent Lysandra flying backward, her beautiful mask finally cracking to reveal the monster beneath. The shattered crystal released something unexpected. Not darkness, but memories. Decades of stolen moments from murdered Nightblooms flooded the ceremony hall in vivid, undeniable detail. Every wolf present saw the truth. Lysandra systematically hunting the bloodline, draining their gift, building her power on genocide. Through the cascade of memories, Sayomara saw her own mother's final moments, not just her death, but her defiance. Seraphina had known what was coming. She'd hidden something in her daughter, a seed of power that would only bloom when the time was right. "Murderer!" someone in the crowd shouted. Others took up the cry. Lysandra staggered backward, her beautiful facade cracking like porcelain. Without the stolen power sustaining her, her true age began to show. Lines deepening, hair dulling, centuries of artificial youth melting away. "You don't understand," she gasped, pulling out a second crystal, this one pulsing red like a beating heart. "Without control, the bloodlines will corrupt. Omegas with alpha strength will destroy the natural order." "Your order," Sayomara corrected, padding forward in her wolf form, "built on our bones." Lysandra shattered the red crystal against the broken altar. Crimson mist exploded outward, and every wolf in the hall suddenly shifted against their will, except Xiomara. Her Nightbloom gift saw through the compulsion, remained free. But she did something unexpected. Instead of fighting the mist, she breathed it in, let her gift analyze and transform it. The compulsion became revelation. Every wolf touched by the mist suddenly saw their own power clearly, without the limitations tradition had imposed. "What are you doing?" Lysandra shrieked. "What my mother prepared me for," Xiomara replied, her voice carrying both human and wolf tones. "She knew you would use this weapon, so she taught me to turn poison into medicine." The red mist transformed, becoming silver light that revealed truth instead of compelling obedience. Omegas throughout the hall gasped as they felt their true strength for the first time. Alphas stumbled as they realized their dominance had been artificially enhanced by suppressing others. Lord Rasmus was the first to recover, his brown wolf form larger than before, but somehow more balanced. "The old teachings were lies," he said, wonder in his voice. They cornered Lysandra in the temple's inner sanctum where she kept her collection. Hundreds of vials containing blood, essence, and fragments of power stolen from generations of victims. "This is my life's work," she shrieked, standing before the collection. "Centuries of perfecting the bloodlines, controlling evolution, maintaining balance." "This is grave robbing," Xiomara said, shifting back to human form. The ceremonial dress had been destroyed in her transformation, but she felt no shame. She was done hiding. "Every vial is a life you stole." Lysandra pulled out a third crystal, white as bone, covered in ancient runes. "This contains your mother's essence," she hissed, "her gift, preserved and concentrated. I'll drink it myself if I must, become a Nightbloom through consumption rather than birth." The crystal began to glow, and Xiomara felt her mother's presence, trapped, tortured, but somehow still aware. "Mother," she whispered, and her violet eyes blazed brighter than ever. The Nightbloom gift erupted from her with unprecedented force, not attacking Lysandra, but calling to every stolen essence in the room. The vials began to sing, a harmonious chorus of the murdered finally given voice. "What are you doing?" Lysandra screamed, clutching the white crystal tighter. "What my bloodline was meant to do," Xiomara replied, setting the truth free. Every vial shattered simultaneously. The released essences didn't dissipate. They converged on Lysandra, showing her the truth of every life she'd taken, forcing her to experience every death from the victim's perspective. Lysandra collapsed, screaming, aging decades in seconds as the weight of her crimes crashed down upon her. The white crystal fell from her grasp, and Xiomara caught it gently. Inside, she felt her mother's essence, finally free from corruption. The presence wrapped around her like a warm embrace, whispered words of love and pride, then dissolved into peaceful light that settled into Xiomara's bones, not possessing, but strengthening what was already there. "It's over," Zephyrian said, pulling a robe around Xiomara's shoulders. But the sanctum doors burst open. Lord Rasmus stood there, bloodied but determined. "Your Majesties, we have a problem. The transformation, it's spreading beyond the castle. Every wolf in the kingdom will be affected within hours." Xiomara looked at the empty vials, the broken crystals, the withered form of Lysandra barely breathing on the floor. "No," she said firmly, "it's not over. It's just beginning." She turned to Zephyrion. "Your grandmother, Celestara, she was a Nightbloom. That means you carry the gift too, dormant but present." His eyes widened, storm gray shifting to show flecks of gold. "That's impossible. The gift only manifests in Omegas." "Another of Lysandra's lies," Xiomara interrupted. The gift manifests in those who embrace both strength and sight, dominance and wisdom. Alpha or Omega doesn't matter. Only balance does. She took his hands, feeling the protection runes he'd given her respond to his touch. Together, we can guide the transformation. But it means completing our bond, not through ceremony or force, but through choice. True mates, equal in power. Zephyrian didn't hesitate. Yes. Their bonding was nothing like the elaborate ceremony Lysandra had planned. It was simple, primal, true. They bid each other simultaneously, marking themselves as equals. The moment their blood mingled, Zephyrian's dormant gift awakened with a flash of violet in his eyes. Together, their combined power swept outward like a silver-gold wave, not controlling the transformation, but guiding it, helping every wolf find their true balance between strength and wisdom. Across the kingdom, wolves stopped fighting their changes and embraced them. Omegas discovered strength, alphas discovered empathy, and many found themselves somewhere in between. A new designation that had no name yet, but didn't need one. When it was done, they stood together in the ruined sanctum, truly bonded, truly equal. "What do we do with her?" Rasmus asked, gesturing to Lysandra's withered form. Sayomara looked down at the woman who had destroyed so many lives. "Let her live," she decided, "in the same cell that held me. Let her experience what she inflicted on others, but with one difference. We'll leave the door unlocked. Her only prison will be the weight of what she's done." As guards carried Lysandra away, she laughed weakly. "You think you've won? Other kingdoms will never accept Omega equality. They'll come for you?" "Let them come," Zephyrian said, pulling Xiomara close. "They'll find us ready." The council chamber erupted before dawn. Sayomara stood beside Zephyrian's throne, not behind it as tradition demanded, but beside it, in a chair of equal height and grandeur. The symbolism was unmistakable. "This is unprecedented," Lord Fenwick snarled, his gray beard trembling with indignation. "An Omega in the council chamber? Making decisions of state? The other kingdoms will declare war. Then we'll show them what equality means in battle," Sayomara responded, her voice steady. The completed mate bond with Zephyrian had fully awakened her Nightbloom gift. She could see the fear beneath Fenwick's anger, the terror of change. More importantly, she could see the flicker of hope in his eyes that he was desperately trying to suppress. "You've been free for mere days," Lord Aldrich said, though his tone held more concern than condescension. "Perhaps time to adjust." "Time?" Xiomara stood. "Tell that to the Omega locked in the North Point Fortress, or the one in Greyhold, or the dozens in unmarked graves because they showed signs of strength." She pulled out documents they'd found in Lysandra's chambers. "Your former High Priestess kept detailed records. 300 Omegas with variant traits murdered over 50 years. Systematic genocide, and you all looked away." "We didn't know," Fenwick protested. "You didn't want to know," Xiomara corrected. "It was convenient to believe Omegas were naturally weak. It justified your privilege." Through her gift, she saw the truth in each council member. Fenwick had an Omega grandson hidden away. Aldrich's own daughter had shown variant traits before mysteriously dying of illness. They all carried secrets, shame, complicity. Zephyrian stood, his presence commanding instant attention. "The Queen speaks truth, and changes begin today. Every Omega in chains will be freed. Every law declaring Omega inferiority will be rewritten. The other kingdoms will unite against us," Lord Aldrich warned. "King Cassius of Ironhold has already mobilized his armies. He's bringing something, spelled weapons designed to suppress the transformation." A knock interrupted them. A guard entered, looking shaken. "Your Majesties, 3 Omegas from the mountain fortress have arrived. They say the liberation has begun." The 3 Omegas who entered bore familiar scars. The eldest, white-haired despite her youth, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she addressed Xiomara, bowing slightly. "I'm Thessa. These are Corvain and Era. We were in the cells below yours." "Stand tall," Xiomara said gently, moving forward to clasp Thessa's hands. "We don't kneel anymore." Thessa's eyes filled with tears. "Is it true? What we felt 3 nights ago when the crystals shattered? The awakening?" "Show them," Xiomara said. Thessa shifted, her wolf massive, pure white with eyes like Arctic storms, not quite as large as Xiomara's silver form, but far beyond what any Omega should possess. The council members pressed against the walls in shock. "Impossible," Fenwick gasped. "No," Xiomara said, her gift showing her the truth. "Natural. What Lysandra suppressed is returning. And you, Lord Fenwick, know this better than most. Your grandson, he's not at a distant academy, is he?" Fenwick went pale. "How did you—" "The Nightbloom gift sees truth through deception. He's in the Eastern Estate, locked away because you feared what people would think of an Omega Fenwick." Her voice gentled. "But he doesn't have to hide anymore." "None of them do." Before Fenwick could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Guards rushed in. "Your Majesties! King Cassius has arrived with 500 soldiers. He has 40 Omegas in chains, and weapons that burn like iron but worse. He demands the Omega Queen surrender for crimes against nature." "That was fast," Rasmus muttered. "He was already coming," Xiomara realized, her gift revealing the truth. Lysandra summoned him before the ceremony as insurance. She promised him something. Me. They moved to the castle walls. Below, King Cassius waited with his army. Between them, 40 Omegas knelt in chains that glowed with unnatural light, spelled iron, designed to hurt even awakened wolves. "Xiomara Nightbloom," Cassius called out, his voice magically amplified. "You've perverted the natural order. Surrender yourself, or I execute 1 Omega every hour." Xiomara felt the chained Omega's pain through her gift, but also something else. Nascent power stirring, fighting against the spelled chains. The awakening couldn't be fully suppressed, even by enhanced iron. "Thessa," she said quietly, "can you fight?" Thessa smiled, all teeth. "We've been fighting for years. Now we get to win." Xiomara stepped onto the wall's edge where everyone could see her. The silver bands on her wrists caught the dawnlight, transforming her scars into something like armor. "King Cassius," she called back, "you brought chained Omegas to my door." "That was your first mistake." She raised her hands, the Nightbloom gift flowing outward, not as attack, but as revelation. Every Omega in the city felt it, and hundreds began climbing the walls to stand with her. But more than that, she sent her power toward the spelled chains, understanding their construction through her gift. "Your second mistake," she continued as Omegas throughout the city began to shift, revealing wolves of every size, many far larger than tradition claimed possible, was thinking spelled iron could hold back evolution itself. She spoke a single word in the old tongue, a word her mother had whispered as she died, a word that meant freedom and truth combined. The spelled chains on Cassius's prisoners didn't just break, they dissolved, the magic unraveling as her gift revealed their false nature. 40 prisoners became 40 fighters in seconds. But the true shock came when some of Cassius's own soldiers, Omegas hiding in alpha armies, threw down their weapons, and joined the rebellion. "This is impossible," Cassius roared. "Omegas cannot." "Cannot what?" Sayomara challenged, shifting to her silver wolf form atop the wall. "Cannot be strong? Cannot fight? Cannot rule?" She leaped from the wall, an impossible height that should have shattered her bones, but the awakened power and her mother's final gift carried her safely down. Zephyrian followed, his black wolf landing beside her silver one, and together they faced the Ironhold army. But they weren't alone. Every Omega in the city poured through the gates, not as victims, but as warriors. Thessa led them, her white wolf form blazing in the morning sun. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. Cassius's spelled weapons failed against truly awakened wolves. His soldiers, faced with impossible odds and questioning their own beliefs, surrendered one by one. "This isn't over," Cassius snarled as guards restrained him. "The other kingdoms—" "We'll learn what you learned," Xiomara interrupted, shifting back to human form. "Evolution isn't coming. It's here, and you can either embrace it or be left behind." She turned to address both armies, "But we offer something Lysandra never did. Choice. Any who wish to leave may go. Any who wish to stay and learn what equality truly means are welcome." Nearly half of Cassius's army chose to stay, including a young Omega soldier who threw herself at Xiomara's feet. "My sister," she sobbed. "She's in chains in Ironhold. Please." "We'll free her," Xiomara promised. "We'll free them all." News of Cassius's defeat spread faster than wildfire. Within days, Omega uprisings erupted across 7 kingdoms. The old order, built on lies about Omega weakness, crumbled as thousands discovered their true strength. But more than that, alphas were discovering that true strength didn't require dominance. In the Great Hall where Xiomara had nearly been executed, representatives from every kingdom gathered. Not just alphas now, Omegas stood as equals, voices finally heard. "The Northern Alliance offers terms," announced Queen Corvina, one of the few progressive rulers. "Full Omega equality in exchange for shared knowledge of the awakening." "The Eastern Kingdoms resist," Lord Hadrian reported. "They're using new weapons, not just spelled iron, but something that targets the transformation itself." Through her gift, Xiomara saw the truth. They're using Lysandra's research. She had contingency plans. She stood, addressing the assembly. "Then we show them that evolution can't be stopped by weapons or walls." "You're suggesting continental war?" Old Lord Fenwick asked, though his tone had changed dramatically. His Omega grandson Tavian now sat beside him, freed and proud, the young wolf's unusual green eyes marking him as another variant. "I'm suggesting continental evolution," Xiomara corrected. "Peaceful, if possible, but freedom isn't negotiable." Zephyrian took her hand, their bond humming with shared purpose. Through their connection, she felt something new, a third heartbeat, faint but distinct. Their child, already carrying the combined gifts of both bloodlines. "The Queen speaks for both of us." "For all of us," Zephyrian declared. A young Omega messenger burst in, bearing burns from spelled weapons. "Your Majesties." "The Eastern armies. They have something new. A device that forces wolves back into human form and keeps them there. They're marching on 3 fronts." Xiomara closed her eyes, letting her gift expand outward, seeing the truth across vast distances. "They're afraid," she said softly, "so afraid that they're willing to destroy their own people to maintain control." "Then we stop them," Thessa said firmly. As the new general of the freed Omega forces, she'd proven herself brilliant in both strategy and combat. "No," Shiomara said, surprising everyone. "We don't stop them. We transform them." She turned to the assembly. "Every weapon they create is based on fear of what we are. But what if we show them what we're becoming? Not just Omegas rising or Alphas falling, but something new entirely." "You're speaking of the third designation," Lord Aldrich said slowly. "The ones who are neither Alpha nor Omega, but something between." "Not between," Xiomara corrected. "Beyond. The awakening isn't just making Omegas stronger. It's revealing that our classifications were always false. We're all just wolves, each unique, each valuable." She stood, power radiating from her, not dominance, but invitation. "Who will come with me?" Not to fight, but to show them what unity looks like. The response was immediate. Hundreds rose, Alphas, Omegas, and those who had discovered they were neither. Even Lord Fenwick stood, his aged joints protesting. "My grandson sees truth in colors," he said quietly. "A gift we tried to suppress. No more hiding." The final confrontation took place on the Blood Moon Plain, where legend said the first wolves were born. 3 eastern kingdoms had united, bringing 10,000 soldiers and machines designed to suppress wolf nature itself. But Xiomara had a different plan. As the armies faced each other, she stepped forward alone, Zephyrian at her side. The spelled weapons turned toward them, humming with malevolent energy. "You fight to preserve a lie," she called out, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "But truth can't be killed with machines." She began to sing, not with power but with pure emotion. The song her mother had sung while dying, a night bloom lament that spoke of love transcending death, of truth surviving all attempts to bury it. One by one, others joined her. Thessa's strong voice, Corvain's deep harmony, even Lord Fenwick's weathered tone. The song spread through their ranks, then beyond. Across the field, Omegas in the eastern armies began to respond. Their suppressed wolves stirred, fighting against the machine's influence. But more than that, Alphas began to feel it too, the artificial inflation of their dominance cracking. "Silence them," the Eastern kings commanded. But how do you silence a truth that lives in every heart? The machines overloaded one by one, unable to suppress what was not a transformation, but a revelation. Wolves across the battlefield didn't just shift, they discovered their true forms. Some remained unchanged, others grew or shrank, and many found themselves in forms that defied all classification. The battle never truly began. It ended with recognition, wolves seeing themselves clearly for the first time. King Erasmus of the Eastern Alliance fell to his knees, his own transformation revealing him to be not the pure alpha he'd claimed, but something more complex. "We were so afraid," he whispered. "Fear is forgivable," Xiomara said, helping him stand. "Cruelty isn't. You'll abdicate. Councils with equal representation will rule, not just Alpha and Omega, but every variation of wolf." As the kingdoms restructured, Xiomara stood with Zephyrian on the same castle wall where she'd first shown her true form. Her hand rested on her growing belly, where their twins grew, children who would be born into a world without chains. "We've changed everything," he said softly. "No," she corrected, watching as wolves of every designation trained together below. "We've revealed everything. The truth was always there, waiting to be freed." Thessa approached, now bearing the title of Marshal General. "Your Majesties, Lysandra has requested an audience. She says she has information about the prophecy." They found Lysandra in her unlocked cell, withered beyond recognition. She hadn't tried to leave. The weight of her crimes kept her imprisoned more surely than any chains. "You're pregnant," she observed immediately. "Twins, if I'm not mistaken." "Speak your piece," Zephyrian said coldly. Lysandra laughed bitterly. "There was a prophecy I tried to prevent. When Nightbloom and Valdris blood unite, the children born will end the age of classifications entirely. They won't be alpha or omega or anything in between. They'll be something new. The first of a new evolution." "Good," Sayomara said simply. Lysandra's eyes widened. "You don't understand. Everything will change. Every tradition, every structure." "Everything already has changed," Sayomara interrupted. "You're just the last to accept it." She turned to leave, then paused. "The door remains unlocked, Lysandra. You're free to leave whenever you choose to forgive yourself. But that's a chain only you can break." 1 year later. The great hall bloomed with celebration unlike any before. Wolves of every designation and those who claimed no designation at all mingled freely. The old hierarchies had dissolved into something organic, natural, free. Sayomara stood on the balcony, her twins sleeping in her arms. The boy's eyes held violet flecks within gold, a perfect blend of his parents' gifts. The girl's fur, when she shifted, was black shot through with silver constellations. Both were something entirely new, neither alpha nor omega, but simply themselves. "The Continental Council ratified the Freedom Charter," Zephyrian said, joining her. "Unanimous vote. Even the former Eastern Kingdoms agreed." "And Lysandra?" "Still in her cell, though Thessa reports she's been helping some of the newly awakened to understand their gifts. Perhaps redemption is possible, even for her." Below them, the training grounds showed the new reality, wolves learning from each other regardless of size or traditional designation. Tavian, Lord Fenwick's grandson, taught others to see the emotional colors he perceived. Era had discovered she could help wolves find their true forms through song. "Your Majesties," Thessa approached, her white fur now bearing silver markings, a sign of her growing power. "The memorial is ready." They walked to the new garden, where a statue stood. Not of any ruler or hero, but of broken chains transforming into flying birds. Below it, an inscription. "In memory of all who died for the crime of being themselves. In celebration of all who live free. The age of chains has ended. The age of truth has begun." Sayomara knelt, placing a silver flower at the memorial's base, a hybrid bloom that shouldn't exist, like so many of them. "For you, Mother," she whispered. "We did it." As the sun set, painting the sky in impossible colors, hundreds of wolves howled together, not in dominance or submission, but in pure joy. The sound carried across the continent, reaching every kingdom, every fortress, every heart that had ever yearned to be free. In her unlocked cell, Lysandra heard the howl and finally stood. For the first time in a year, she stepped through the open door, tears streaming down her ancient face. The twins stirred in Sayomara's arms, their young voices joining the howl. Not wolf or human, but something altogether new. The sound of evolution itself, of a future without chains, of truth finally, completely, eternally free. The silver moon rose full and bright, blessing a world remade not through force, but through the simple, revolutionary act of letting every wolf be exactly who they were meant to be.